Hi, I'm John DeDakis, and you're one to one with me. And I'm one to one with Ted Iliff. Ted, this is I've been looking forward to this for only a day because that was all the advance that I had about this. Let me just tell you quickly about Ted before we jump into this. In fact, before we do anything, I want to show you the cover of his memoir. It's Mission Road, and I'm gonna go to the two shot again. This is a low budget operation, Ted. Um, Let me just read just a quick intro to give people a sense of who you are. You're the author of the new memoir, Mission Road, a journalist's life from Kansas to Kandahar. He describes it as a memoir that covers his, quote, exploits as a nerdy child, imperfect student, energetic reporter, pedantic editor, fortunate manager, globe-trotting consultant, and curious teacher for nearly half a century. Our time in journalism overlapped at CNN in Atlanta, where I was one of his supervisors, and then he became my boss, and we were in the CNN control room together in Atlanta on 9/11. And his novel, his memoir explores his successes and mistakes, as well as his profession's glories and blemishes. So that gives us a lot to talk about. So thanks for doing this.
Glad to do it. I love it. This is great. Good to see
Look,
you.
thank you. It's great to see you too. You haven't changed.
Yeah, thank you.
You're retired. We
Yeah,
both are retired now.
yeah, and I got soft focus on, so that's one thing there.
Look, we were together at 9/11 on 9/11 at CNN, and I want to ask you, CNN has changed a lot
Yeah,
since we've been there, and I know you teach journalism. I've taught journalism, and from a personal standpoint, I think CNN has changed. I'm not sure for the better, but
mhm.
I'd be interested in your take.
Yeah. CNN has changed, and it's not for the better. Um, the problem CNN faces is that it has gone into the path of profit. And I'm going to sound like an old dinosaur here, and I'm going to sound idealistic, but that's me, and that's where I believe in things. Ted Turner always said the news is a star. Excuse me. And that became a little naive. We had to change that a little bit. We needed more personalities on our newscast because that's the way the business worked. But then sizzle started to sell more than the steak.
Right.
And with Fox and others coming in, opinion sold. And people, we all can say, oh, this is terrible. There's so much opinion on news and so on and so forth. But that's what people are watching,
Right.
and they are businesses. And you don't have to like the business, but that's the way the business is running, and that's what it's being motivated by.
Would
Right?
you say that that's why Chris Cuomo was hired in the first place?
Yeah, I think that's driving any hire right now. Is anybody who's hired in a prime time position like Chris was in, they're doing it because they have an established name beforehand. That's Chris with his brother and his father, and he also just had his own record, his own presence. They do tests and all that, and he tested out well, and it looked like a sure thing. And for a while, it kind of was. But yeah, for sure.
And it's my opinion that it was sort of a conflict of interest waiting to happen, and that he
Yeah,
probably shouldn't
yeah,
have been hired because of that. But
yeah,
that's just me.
yeah. And whatever. I don't watch broadcast news very much anymore, but
Same here.
I didn't watch CNN very much. Every once in a while, I would catch it, and if they would have a story about New York and about his brother on, I would think that show should never have a story about Cuomo anytime, no matter good, bad, other, whatever it is, the fluff, whatever it is. That name should never show up in news on that show.
Right. And I have to confess, there were times when I watched Chris interview his brother
Yeah,
because it was great TV. It
yeah,
was infotainment.
yep, exactly right. But it's the nature of the beast. I mean, it's not CNN's fault. It's not. It started with Fox. I'll be very honest. I think that's where it all began. And I'm not saying, that I'm not being pejorative here. I'm just saying a fact. In 1996, they came on the air. We were at CNN. We looked at them. We thought, MSNBC was coming on. And we thought, well, they got all the money. They're going to be the ones we have to worry about.
Right.
But Roger Ailes found the formula. He found the talk radio audience who was not watching CNN, and he created his own audience, and it went from there.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your memoir.
The memoir, it literally, as I say in some of the things I've written, it's a product of people telling me, you ought to write a book. Um, I've been very fortunate. I've had a lot of experiences, and been a lot of places, and done a lot of things. And I don't have any kids, and I felt that, you know, people were saying, write a book, tell us what you did, and I felt, well, I really should do that. And I had it in my mind for a long time, and then the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit in March of 20, my wife worked. She came home to work. She was working from home, and we were in lockdown here in Kansas City area, and like every place else. And I was staring at the four walls, and I was thinking, what now? And there's only so much daytime television anybody can watch of any kind, and you start going nuts. So I thought, this is it. This is some way or other I'm supposed to sit down and write the book. So I sat down middle of March 20, and the next 2 months roughly, every day, every weekday, I sat down and wrote until I got tired.
Did you have fun writing it, or was it?
Oh,
did
yeah.
It was fun.
Oh yeah, it was fun. Now, the thing about a memoir is, I found out writing it, is, yes, it was a lot of fun remembering a lot of things, looking up things that I'd kind of forgotten, discovering things in my notes. I realized, oh wow, I got to put that in. The other thing is it helped me be a little reflective. And I worked for 3 years. The only time I was out of journalism was 3 years, 2006 to 2009, when I worked for the National Board for Certified Counselors. I've been on their board for a while. So I learned counseling principles, and I learned, how to judge, and I learned about myself as much as I learned about the job. And when I look back at what I did in my career, I particularly saw some moments where I said, that really wasn't the best way to handle that. And there's places in the books where I talk about that. Radio for Europe was one place, CNN was another place, and so on. And so I was a little introspective. I didn't get real heavy with it because it's not that kind of book, but it helped me clarify some issues that had happened in my life as well and in my career. But the main thing was I just got to relive all the stuff that I was doing, and it was fun. Almost all of it was fun.
And you told me the first draft was about 120,000 words,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
a bit long.
Little heavy, yeah. Right.
How hard was it to edit it down?
Not very, because I had somebody. Nobody looked at it. My wife was the only one who looked at the 120,000 one. But people were saying, remember what you're writing about here. And I had a lot of personal stuff about my childhood, about my time in high school, and before I went to college, and a little bit about college. Before I went to work, I had a lot of stuff. And most of that is where I cut that out, and that got me down to the 90,000 words I'm at right now.
Let's talk a little bit about your career, and some of this stuff I'm not even aware of. I mean, you and I were together in the late 90s and early 2000s.
90s, yeah. I was there from 89 to 2002.
And I started at CNN in 88 as a writer. And so I believe I was your supervisor not long after I became an editor.
Yeah. I mean, you were one of the people, several, who taught me how to write for television, because I didn't know. I walked in stone cold, never having worked in TV in my life. And you all were the ones that put up with all my nonsense until I figured out, for the most part, how to do it.
Yeah, but one of the things that you told me is that you had worked at USA Today at its inception, helping them to learn how to, write succinctly, which is exactly the essence of broadcast.
No, that part of it, broadcast writing, I had that from UPI days, writing in the radio wire. And yes, USA Today, they wanted to keep things tight, and everybody said, you can't tell a story in less than 12 inches of copy. Well, yes, we did. And now almost everybody does. But I was teaching them how to write briefs, basically. The problem with television was putting the words with the pictures. Right. That's where I had problems. That's where I thought, well, I know what this story is about. And at that time, 89, I was writing a lot about Eastern Europe, because that's where I just come from, was Radio for Europe. And so I said, well, I know a lot about this. I'll put this line in important. I'll put this in there, and then no pictures to match. And so you're talking about one thing and you're seeing something else, and you and Kim and Egerbretson and several others are going, it doesn't work that way here. And that's what I had to learn. So it was, plus the rules, the jargon of television, the whole left side of a script. If you've ever worked in TV, you know what I'm talking about. The instructions on what's supposed to happen on the screen, never mind the words. All of that was Greek to me, and I had to learn all of that from day one, from scratch.
So was I a heavy-handed editor?
No, no. There was. I'm trying to think. I cannot name you a heavy-handed editor along that editor's row at CNN. I've had worked for some heavy-handed editors, not any I can remember at CNN.
Well, you were fun to work with, and then you became my boss,
Yeah,
and
over
that
after
was
time. Yeah,
so then you had your opportunity for revenge, and
revenge. There was nothing to avenge. That was the beauty of it. I got to tell you something. Is that I worked for people who don't know me. I worked in two stages in the CNN newsroom. I came in '89, worked there, learned how to do all that stuff, and then in '92 they started expanding CNN International. And having my background, I said that's where I want to be. So I went down there, and we eventually expanded and got that going to what it became. And then in '98. Sid Bettyfield, who'd been a colleague of mine at CNN, became general manager of CNN, and he brought me up as executive editor. When I came back up again, the editing crew and the writing crew, the ones that I was supposed to manage, they were so good as a group that it was kind of intimidating. I was hesitant to give any kind of guidance because these are some really top-notch writers and editors. And so I had learned from Chris Kramer, the late Chris Kramer at CNN, that in any job you take, you kind of wait months before you actually start tinkering with things. And so I just sat back, and I had Marty Hill as my assistant. He was doing schedules, so I didn't have to worry about schedules anymore, thank God. And so I could sit back and see what was happening. And we were computerizing. We were going to computerize scripting, and so I had to manage all of that, which was kind of a side, not side. It was really important, but it kept me busy for a while. Anyway, the staff was so good. It sometimes was even intimidating. So that was the fun part too.
Well, you were one of my best bosses.
Well, thank you.
And I can there was only one time that I remember that you had to scold me because I think I sent a pissed off memo to the entire network, and it probably blew back onto you, and you came down and you kind of sat next to me and said, "Don't do that again."
Oh, good. I didn't yell.
No, you didn't.
CNN taught me not to yell. That's where I never was much of a yeller anyway, but I had a bunch of bosses prior to CNN who were yellers, and CNN taught me not to yell. So good.
Well, I remember.
I'm glad that's how I handled it.
You handled it well, but I can remember some yellers before you got there. So, but we won't go there.
Okay.
Talk about 9/11 briefly, because you did get an Emmy for your for CNN's coverage of that. Talk about that, because you and I were in the control room together.
Well, I talk about it in the book. The second part of CNN. It's about 8:45. I go in the control room every day. At that time, I'm going at about 8:30, and I'm staying there until about 12 until programming comes out of Washington, I think it was. So 8:30, I'm there. I'm sitting down in the back row. I'm getting ready. And 8:45, we look up, and on this monitor, there's a shot from a weather camera in New York, I think it was. It was one of their tall tower cams. And here's this tower in the World Trade Center. It's got a big hole in it. Smoke's coming out of it. And, everybody knows now exactly what it was. Imagine what you're doing. You're sitting there, and you're seeing this for the very first time, and you're supposed to tell the world what's going on. And my job as executive editor at that point was the words of the network. I was the one who was responsible for the fonts, what the words that you're seeing on the screen there, and the graphics, what they said, and the writing, and some editorial issues. So we're sitting there, we're thinking, what have we got here? And I immediately think about, I'm a nerd when it comes to history. I remember February of '45, a B-25 bomber crashed into the
Empire State Building, right?
It was foggy. It was 1945. They didn't have hardly any electronics. It was terrible. But this wasn't a B-25 into the Empire State Building. And we're thinking
that was my first reaction too.
Yeah, a lot of people knew about that. And you're immediately looking at the weather, and you think, was it foggy or something? It's crystal clear out. I mean, it can't be like fog or any kind of impediment of vision. And slowly we start thinking, this is something a little bit more. And then the second one hit. Right. And when I saw the second one, I saw the flames. I didn't see the plane. I was looking at a different monitor, and I thought, another fuel tank exploded or something? And then we got another shot, and we saw the plane. And then it was like, now what's going on?
Well, and let me pick up the story there.
Okay,
I worked overnights that day,
okay.
And so I was already downstairs in the CNN gym, and I was on the elliptical, and I was reading a book, and there were monitors up in front, and the sound was down. So I look up, and I see what's going on, and so I'm thinking a plane, like a B-52 has hit the building.
Yeah,
And
right.
so but I knew this was a big story. So I got off the elliptical. I went in and I saw actually the second plane hit. I get off and I called you. I called the control room and you picked up and I said, do you want me to come in? And you said, no, I think we've got this under control. Pick up the story
Yeah.
from there.
Well, there was another thing I probably was thinking, and I'd gotten this from previous disasters like the war starting and so on, is that somebody like you, we didn't need you right that minute. We were going to need you down the line.
Right.
Somebody's going to start burning out here pretty quick. And there are videos of the CNN newsroom and control room that Dave Schuster put one out a while back. It's fascinating stuff I'd never seen. And people reach burnout. That's nature. And you need to keep a good bullpen available of your stars so that when people need to be changed out, you've got people coming in who are quality workers.
So let me pick up from there.
All right.
I took a shower, got out of the shower, watched, checked out the monitor, and then the first tower fell.
Yeah.
And so my gut reaction is, I'm not going to call Ted. I'm just going to go in.
Yeah.
So I put my gear in my car. And as I was walking toward the building, I remember thinking, we could be a target.
Yep.
And I remember thinking, they didn't need me. I could just go home. And I didn't. I decided to suck it up, go in. And I think by that time, almost all the computers were down except for the ones in the control room.
Yeah.
And so I was shuttling information from Nicole File on her side of the newsroom to you, getting the fonts in the computer.
As it turned, it was so enormous that we turned out we needed everybody. Anybody who showed up, we needed them that day. I mean, it was the enormity of it, and I'll use that word the way I mean it, was such that we were shorthanded regardless of what was going on.
So once you knew that once the second plane hit and the towers start falling, what's going through your mind? What role did you have, and how would you describe what you were doing?
I'm on autopilot. I am just managing news at that point. What do we know? How are we saying it? What do we got on the screen? Where are they going next? All of that sort of thing. I'm not trying to analyze anything. In fact, I mentioned in the memoir, at one point, the sliding glass doors that go into the control room slide open, and Sid sticks his head in, and he says, "We're at war." Whoa. And I actually had a conversation with him because I couldn't remember if he said we're under attack or we're at war. Well, we agreed that it was we're at war because it was obvious we were under attack. So he sticks his head in and says we're at war. And at that moment, a whole new phase entered where it was like, okay, now we start dealing with this and not just as a disaster, but as much more than a disaster. And from that point on, in a way, it was very stressful. In a way, we were trying to sort out all the stuff that was being reported that wasn't true. But the other way, it was like you just do it. You just get into that mentality where you gotta just focus on what has to be done right there.
Do you remember Ted Turner coming into the
I've seen the video of him coming in and standing next to me. Yeah,
right. Sure, and he I don't remember him saying a word. He just stood there.
He was with somebody I didn't recognize, some other Turner executive, and he did not. He just stood there and he was just watching. And I was in this video, Schechter's video. I was right behind him, and I was doing my thing and so on. But Ted was just there, just to be there.
One of the things you said that I want to pick up on, because we are in a whole different era in terms of facts. Mm-hmm. You talked about trying to find out what's true. Nowadays, they don't care. Not CNN. CNN still cares.
Well, no, I think a lot of people care. It's just that we have decided to redefine the word truth. And the famous thing about alternate facts. I mean, my God, I tell my students when I was teaching, I told my students, we don't use the word truth. Don't ever say we tell the truth or the truth about this is this. We're not going to know the truth about anything for about 50 to 100 years because historians will tell us the truth if we're lucky. We know what's happening. We know facts. We know what journalists don't originate a whole lot of information. People don't understand that. Journalists are conduits for information. Most of what journalists write or report or whatever else they do, it's coming from someplace else. It's coming from another source. Only when they are actually viewing it themselves are they originating the information. So we're relying on other sources, and that means we're relying on people to be truthful. And what does that mean? I mean, that's gone right out the window.
Well, it's
Oh,
the
no.
idea of fact checking. I mean, there still is a segment of journalism that does care about that and does fact check.
But now I just read something today by someone who questions the validity of the fact checkers, saying that the fact checkers have motives for skewing their interpretation of the facts they are checking.
Do you
And
buy
that's
that? Do you buy that
no,
criticism?
well, I mean, it depends on who's doing the fact checking. If Newsmax is doing the fact checking, yeah, maybe. And on the other side, I don't know. I don't know very many of the left leaning ones, but somebody is doing that. Fine. If it's AP, if it's Associated Press or Reuters doing the fact checking, okay, I'll take that.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because I do a lot of speaking, and just about every talk I give, I'm always asked about, media bias or fake news. And so what is, I mean, and one of my answers is it's important to be a discerning news consumer. So my question to you is, how, with the advent of the internet and so much information out there, how should one be able to discern credible information so that they can understand what the facts are?
First of all, you try to find there are reliable sources of information in the news, right? Still. And I mentioned Associated Press, Reuters, BBC, believe it or not, Voice of America, their news service is very strict. It has to be by law. It has to be strict. They are there. But what you have to do is you have to discipline yourself to expose yourself to multiple sources. When I was living in Europe, people there, Germany and Britain and other places, they'd read 3 newspapers a day. And 2 or 3 newspapers, and they wouldn't all be the same political perspective, just to see what the landscape was. And this was like 30 years ago they were doing this. People don't have I know people don't have time to do that anymore, but that's what you got to do. You've got to say, all right, this news source is saying this. I wonder what somebody else, if I'll just pure black and white. If Fox is reporting something and you say, well, I don't know about that, go to MSNBC, check them out, see what they're saying. The New York Times is reporting something, check out the Wall Street Journal, or check out New York Post if you want to go that far. It requires discipline and time to seek out information that is contradictory to make your own decision. Most people don't have the time to do that, and most people just aren't interested in doing that.
All right. One of the things you've done in your career is you've taught journalism.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in any way optimistic about the journalists who are coming to, who are just entering the profession?
Yes and no. I am. The students that I had at University of Missouri, Kansas City, they surprised me. They gave me hope. I was really pleasantly surprised at how important they realized writing was and how engaged they were in the news. They had their opinions. They expressed their opinions in class, but they gave me hope that there are, people our age say, the younger generation doesn't care. They don't read, they're lazy, blah, blah, blah. I didn't see that in any of my classes. So that was encouraging. In the seminars and so on I did overseas, the same thing. The young journalists were eager to learn the principles of journalism as you and I had practiced them. The balance and fairness and accuracy and language and all of those things. The problem with that is, and it's true in the United States too, the students learn a certain idealistic or certain theoretical way to do journalism, and then they go out into the real world. And they sit in a newsroom where the managing editor or the news director has a bias, or he or she is being told by the front office or upstairs, let's do this story this way. Well, the students coming out with all of these great ideas of what good journalism is are working for people who aren't following the rules that way. And the question becomes, what do you do? And I advise my students, I said, look, if you want to get fired over principle, that's your choice, but that doesn't really help a whole lot. Try to do the best you can, try to maintain your standards as best you can, and advance into the profession till you get to the point that you're the one making the decisions and giving the orders rather than taking them from somebody else. That's the only hope.
I've always felt that journalism schools need to teach a class on newsroom politics.
Well, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I taught a class on media management at UMKC, and I talked about the environment that you're going to work in the management situation, and the cross currents not only from the people you're managing, but the people at your level and the people above you. And that would be an interesting class to teach. Yeah.
Talk about how you got into journalism in the beginning. What motivated you to do that?
Again, that's how I started the memoir. My mother was German. I went to Germany for a summer when I was 6 years old. I spent the whole summer there, came back home. I spoke fluent German. I had an accent. I've been speaking nothing but German for the entire summer. Fell in love with Germany, fell in love with Europe. And I thought, I don't ever remember consciously thinking this, but I'm sure it was like, this is what I want to do, something over here. So all through school, elementary, junior high school, didn't speak much German or anything. I went back to Germany when I was a sophomore in high school for another summer, and that's where I locked in. After that, I said, all right, I got to find something that's going to get me over here to do this. Mm-hmm. I get accepted to Georgetown University, and they want to put me in the school for economics or foreign affairs, and they want me to have some sort of economics major. I'm going, I can't even balance a checkbook. What the hell am I going to do with economics? So I got to the University of Kansas, which is right up the road, and I took an introductory course in journalism. I thought, that's kind of cool. And then first semester of my sophomore year, I take a beginner writing class, news writing class, and the teacher gets married and has to drop out of the class. And I get a guy, the city editor of the Topeka paper, come in, and he's the teacher. And it's a great thing because he throws away the textbook and he says, we're going to do real world stuff. I start writing, and I have an aptitude for it. He likes what he's seeing, and I do really well in the thing. And then, the next semester, I'm working on the student newspaper. I get hired by the Topeka paper as a campus correspondent. Next summer, I get an internship with the Kansas City Star, and bam, and then I'm done. I mean, I don't care about class, unfortunately, which I talk about in the book. I mean, I know what I want to do, and I'm ready to do it. And so I did it.
And so did you know Bob Dole back then?
Well, no, I met Bob Dole. I covered him. I was UPI's State House correspondent in Topeka early on when I was with UPI. This was in 72, 73, 74. And I'd covered Dole when we did political stuff out of the Kansas City Bureau and certainly in the Topeka Bureau. One day, there was a little ceremony on the State House grounds about 3 trees being planted for 3 MIAs in Southeast Asia. And one of the MIAs was a UPI correspondent, freelancer. So they asked me to say a few words. Bob Dole was there and said a few words. And with, hi, Senator, thank you very much. Glad to meet you, so on. A few days later, I get a call from his campaign. The guy invites me out to dinner and says, well, we want you to work for our campaign staff. And I go, okay. And I think about it for a little bit. And I said, less money. I wasn't sure what and to prove my early prowess as a political prognosticator, I didn't think he was going to win. So I said no. And he was better off for it, and so was I.
Would it have been, I mean, were you a Republican? I mean, how do you approach that? I mean, if you had worked for him, would you have ever been able to go back to journalism?
I doubt it. Well, the business has changed. I shouldn't say I doubt it. It would have to be a niche where you were hired in a journalism role because of your expertise and your contacts in politics. And that's usually either an editorial writer or a columnist who does that. Could have been, maybe. But at that stage, I was only 3-4 years into my career, and I was having a lot of fun being a wire service reporter. I loved it. So it just would have been the wrong thing for me to do.
Talk about your time at Voice of America and at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty.
Well, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, that was almost 10 years in the 80s. Again, my goal had always been to work in Germany. And at 30 years old, I'm working in Germany. And I'm working for a news organization people had heard of, but I didn't know a lot about it when I went there. And it was, we lived in Munich. It was a great deal, great compensation, great time off, so we could travel a lot. But it was the toughest newsroom I ever worked in, on pure standards. They had a 2-source rule there that CNN's wasn't even as strict as that one was.
What do you mean a 2-source rule?
We couldn't write anything in news. We were in the central newsroom we wrote news in English, and then it was sent out to all of the 44 languages or whatever there were, who would translate our news stories into their language to broadcast. So we were the news source for all of these different language services broadcasting to Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. If we had a story to write, we couldn't write anything unless we had two sources, AP and UPI, or AP and Reuters, or German news agency or French. Two of those had to match pretty much before we could even write it. There were times when somebody had an exclusive, we had to attribute it to them, but it was really tough. And just the construction of the sentences, the use of the information, the editors were at times nitpicky. It was a bit of a gotcha game that they played, and some of the stuff that they did, but you really learned, what the difference was of what you were saying, and how what you might be thinking you're saying is not actually what you're saying, particularly when you realize it's going to be translated into 44 languages. If you're not really clear what you're trying to say, it's going to get mistranslated. So it was a great experience. I get talking to Memoir about, I didn't always handle every situation there as I should have. It may have turned out a different way if I had done things differently, but I'm not complaining. It was a great time, and I still have very, very good friends from those days. So it was a great time.
So now, Mission Road: A Journalist's Life from Kansas to Kandahar is your third book.
Right.
Talk a little bit about the first two.
Well, the first one was in Munich. It's called Hitler and Munich. It was published in 1988, co-written by a guy named Brian Deming. His wife worked with me at Radio Free Europe. Brian was there. He was a freelance writer, great writer. And we were literally having a beer downtown Munich one night. His in-laws were visiting. We were sitting there talking. And Brian says, it would be really cool if somebody ever did a book about what Hitler did here in this town. I mean, where he did all this stuff. And I said, yeah, that'd be a great book. And then we looked at it and said, let's do it. And so that was 85. And so the next 3 years, we started researching. I did the German research because I spoke German. He wrote most of the chapters, about a little over half of the chapters. I found all of the art that we wanted to use. And we walked around the city. It's a book that shows where Hitler lived, where he worked, where he had lunch, where all the major events of the Hitler time in Munich, the Putsch and Kristallnacht and things like that happened. But it gives addresses to all those. We had a little map. We had color-coded numbers and so on where people could go. We didn't want to make it a neo-Nazi pilgrimage book. So we threw in chapters about Dachau and about the White Rose Resistance and other resistance groups, balance things out. And then when we got it done, 1987, late 1987, we started looking for a publisher. And we looked for publishers who had published English language books that were being, German publishers publishing English language books that were being sold in Stars and Stripes bookstores in bases all over Europe. So we figured that was our best shot. First guy wasn't interested because he didn't like the topic. Second of all, the guy didn't like it because he was afraid it was going to become a pilgrimage book. The third guy was a publisher in Berchtesgaden who'd never heard any of this in school. They hadn't taught it to him. And so he said, I want to do this. And so he published the book. So it came out, 20,000 copies, sold out. That was it.
Let me ask you this. And I don't know what your answer is going to be, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot. Is there an echo or any kind of comparison that can be made to the rise of Nazism in Germany and what's going on in the U.S. now?
Oh, man. Oh, John.
Yeah, have fun with it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. There's a softball question for you. Yeah, there are some similarities. And it has to do with the dissatisfaction in society and how the political system is responding to it.
What do you mean?
Germany in the 20s and in the early 30s was a very unhappy place. Economically, socially, it was politically, it was chaos. People were just it was a hard time. And the communists were offering one solution and Hitler was offering another solution. And basically that's the choice that they had to make, that they were allowed to make. Here we have the dissatisfaction, and I won't go into all the details. We all know what the issues are, but people are looking for answers. They want to know, well, who are the people who are going to solve all of this? And millions of Americans have totally lost faith in the system and totally lost faith in the political system and everything else. And they're looking for an alternative. Hitler was an alternative for Germans, and Trump, frankly, was an alternative for Americans. I'm not comparing those two other than that comparison. That's something I have to be very clear about. I think you could make a closer comparison to Trump and Mussolini, because the same thing happened in Italy, but Mussolini didn't have the the nasty baggage that Hitler ended up having with the Jews and all the other stuff that he did.
Okay, but just as a way of clarifying, I mean, Trump, a lot of the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists in the U.S. have seen Trump as an ally, as someone who is in a sense, the one of us, and so
Yeah.
they have. So, isn't there more of a comparison to Hitler as well?
The one thing I have to give, pay attention to is how much of that did Trump really want attributed to him?
Okay.
In other words, did he actively seek to draw those people in, or did he inadvertently? He's not a very clever man when it comes to what he says in public. I'm sorry.
You think?
Did he inadvertently send the code, blow the dog whistles, and do everything else that you can do to attract and encourage that side of American society without realizing he was actually triggering that response?
Okay, but that was pointed out early on. These are dog whistles, and he kept doubling down on it.
Yeah, because it was working for him. Because the numbers were showing it was working.
Okay.
Remember, the only thing that counts is winning. Winning. It's all that matters right now, and that's all he cared about.
So project based on, your experience covering or historically looking at the rise of Hitler. Can you project where the U.S. is going to be going if things change?
I can't. I mean, we're in new territory here. I have no clue. I'm scared. I'm scared.
What?
I'm worried.
Why?
I'm worried that there has been, that people are making decisions based on wrong information. I'll put it as simple as that. Nobody knows where to go to find out what's accurate, what's true, what's even objective, which is humanly impossible in my opinion. But what's reliable information, what's stuff they can make reasonable, informed decisions on. People are not sure anymore where to go to, or they go to where they think they can find it, and it basically is their comfort room.
It reinforces.
Yeah, it's just that they're going to the stuff that they believe in anyway, and they don't just enter that realm. They bunker down in it. They absolutely grab onto it, and you can't shake them from it after that.
So so where do we go from here?
I don't know.
They're that entrenched.
I don't know. I don't know who's going to all of a sudden be the person to say, it'd be perceived as, all right, now this person, let's be a little bit reasonable here. Let's listen to this person or this group, and they're the ones that we're going to really base on. I don't think that's possible.
Well, do you think that there's some hope in the January 6th commission that is looking into the insurrection last year?
Why not? I mean, I am confident they will find a lot of what happened. We will learn a lot about who was behind it, the motivations, so on and so forth. And then one side will say, see, it was an insurrection. These people ought to be in jail. They're traitors. It was an evil thing they did. And the other side is going to say, this is all made up. This is all a political thing by the Democrats who controlled the committee. This is unreliable. You can't believe half this stuff. These people were patriots. They were just, and you're going to have senators and presidential candidates defending people who stormed the Capitol building. And the people who stormed the Capitol building probably were motivated by their own feelings. The politicians are going to be motivated only by, do they think it's going to get them to win? That's the only motivation.
Talk a little bit about The Golden Times, your 2008 book.
That's a historical novel set at the end of World War II in Germany. It's based on the experiences my mother and my father had when they met. My mother's German, my father was American. They met in Karlsruhe, Germany. And so I used that and the story of my mother's family, how they made it through the early times of the occupation after the war.
So was this fiction or nonfiction?
A little bit of both.
You can't have it both ways.
Oh, yes, I can. Yes, I can. I did. I fictionalized some of it, and for the sake of the story, I put some real things happening in there, including some things that my mother was most unhappy about when she read them.
Oh, dear.
But she got over it, and so it was a mix. And people who know me, will read the book and they say, "Well, now you talked about this. Did that really happen?" Yep. And did this really happen? Nope. And so, for example, the male character in the book, my father was an accountant with the occupation. Well, that's not a very exciting character. I mean, some writers can make an accountant exciting. I can't. So I changed him to a wire service reporter because that's what I knew. Yeah. And so some of the things that wire service things that I'd done, some of the things that happened, he was able to cover them. So that's how I was able to talk about how people dealt with the hardship of occupation. And it basically was based on family stories.
Now, are both of these the same publisher?
No, you mean
Those two, the Hitler.
Golden Times and Hitler in Munich was a German publisher in Berchtesgaden. This is Dorrance Publishing, the same people who do the memoir.
Okay, let's. I want to keep talking with you, but let's, for the sake of selling a few books here. It's bookstore.dorrancepublishing.com,
Right.
where you can get a copy of Ted's recent memoir, which is Mission Road, a journalist's journey. No, you say it because I can't see it.
A journalist's life from Kansas to Kandahar.
Okay, excellent. And so that's how you can get a copy of that. And actually, you are one of those modest writers who really doesn't care about the money. Explain that.
Well, no, I do in one way. Half of the earnings from the book are going to go to Veterans Voices Writing Project, which is what I'm involved in. We print a magazine that is entirely writing and graphic arts by veterans. It's meant as a form of therapy as well as a form of archiving and just to let the veterans express themselves. So I hope it sells a few things for that. For me, this is one of those things where, like I say in the book, people say, "Why don't you write a book?" And I said, "Okay, well, pandemic hit." I said, "Okay, I'm going to write a book." And it's just a story I want to tell. I describe this as a 90,000 word epitaph because it just documents everything that I did. I talk about what I was able to do. And if some people find it interesting, great. I'm happy. But if it doesn't sell a whole lot, it's out there. It's like giving
the
birth
legacy.
It's like giving birth to a chair. You kind of go, whew, and that's the end of that. So but if it sells, fine. If it doesn't, I certainly can live with that.
Well, and you and I are both officially retired, but
Yep.
if it sounds to me like your life is as busy and happy as mine is.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about leading tours at the National World War I Museum in Kansas City.
It's more fun than should be legally allowed, to be very honest with you.
Because why?
I get to talk about history, military history particularly, which I'm really interested in. I'm surrounded by one of the great museums of the world, and that's just not me talking. That's TripAdvisor. That's all kinds of people. The National World War I Museum and Memorial in Kansas City is one of the top-rated museums in the world right now. And I get to tell people about things that they really don't know a lot about. Americans don't know a lot about World War I. It was kind of it was brief for us. We were only in it in combat for 6 months in a 4-year war. We lost 125,000, half of them to illness. France and Germany and lost over 1 million. So we were in it, we were out of it. Everybody wanted to forget about it, and that was it. So when they come into the museum and they hear about the beginning of it and the European portion of it, it's all new to them, and that interaction is just a lot of fun.
So what's next?
Good question. I don't know. I honestly am not sure what's next. I've got some friends of mine are saying, "Well, you ought to write this," right? I got a couple of book ideas, but you know how that is. You always think about stuff and you never do them. So I'm going to just sit back now and let this wave subside and see what happens with this book, and then sit back and figure out, well, what else do I want to do? Maybe I'll go back and do some teaching or something. I don't know.
One of the things we talked about just briefly, this will be a sharp turn here. In the few minutes we've got left, talk about online dating.
Online dating. I was involved in a relationship that resulted from online dating. Was now about 15 years ago, and it lasted for several years, and it was quite pleasant, and it just distanced everything ended it. Well, when I moved to Kansas City in 2012, and I was here, and I was dating someone that I'd known for a long time, and that just kind of ended amicably. And I was thinking, well, now what? So I go on to a site called Our Time, which is for people over 50, because, like I said to you, young ingenues are not exactly the type of person I think I should be dating right now. So anyway, so I went on there and I was looking, and Julia, my wife, was there. She said she'd just come from Russia, and she was looking for someone to get to know better and blah blah blah. So we met, and I thought maybe she wanted to move here and she wanted to get a job. She'd just gotten divorced, and so started trying to help her find a job, and other things happened, and so we got married. So it online dating is is great for men and is very treacherous for women.
What do you mean? Why?
Guys can put themselves out there, and it's just it's an ego thing, but you're presenting yourself, and if you meet somebody, then okay, fine. Women have to be very careful because women can be targets, and I don't know men being targets. What I know of is women being targets, and they have to be very suspicious and very careful, and it takes courage for a woman to go online and to start up a relationship, and she has to be very suspicious at first. So there are a lot of things I like about it, but that's the one thing that you have to be careful about.
Interesting. Well, you and I could talk all day. I
Yeah,
want to go. I want to just cycle through. We are talking with Theodore Ted Iliff, who is the author of Mission Road: A Journalist's Life from Kansas to Kandahar, which is his third book. I'm going to show it to you full screen again. It's a great cover, by the way. Talk a little bit about that.
I wish I could talk more, but I love it. At the minute I saw it the first time, it was like, that's it. And the artist who did the Golden Times cover, I like that one too. The problem is that just today I asked the guy who's supervising my book at Dorrance Publishing, I said, can you tell me who the artist was? I want to let the artist know how wonderful and how many compliments that this thing's getting. They can't let me know for privacy reasons because it's a freelancer, so I don't know who did it. But that person knows that they are getting a lot of compliments for the cover because I just think it looks really cool.
It does look really cool. And that is your website, tediliff.com, which is last name is spelled Iliff. And I'm going to go back to this is me just being slow. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I'm glad to hear that. I just talk, so I enjoy it too.
Yeah. Okay. I'm John DeDakis. You can reach me at johndedakis.com, but this is not about me. This is about my friend Ted Iliff. So Ted, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Be continued.
Okay.